Okay, let's talk about pipeline input in PowerShell. And what we mean by pipeline input is using the output from one command as the input from another command. Now, or input for another command. Now, we've been doing this for a while. And so if I do, we'll play with services today. So if I do a get service, it gives me all of my list of services. If I want to paginate it, I pipe that to more. Now what's happening behind the scenes is get service is getting a bunch of objects. It is piping them to another command, moving them down to the pipeline, connected right here, so joiner, to another command called more, which then takes that output and breaks it up into a paginated display, one page at a time. Okay, so we've been doing this for a while using this pipeline. We just haven't really talked about it in great detail. So let's talk about it a little bit more now. So we can take output from one command and use it as input for another command with a couple of restrictions. Now, we'll look at the details here in just a second, but I'm going to give you a real quick general rule of thumb. In general, if commandlets have the same noun, then you can pass objects from one to the other. So I'm going to do a get service. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to do a get command for anything with the noun of service. And you're going to see we have a bunch of them. Get service, new service, restart, resume, set, start, stop, suspend. Okay, if we look at these, we can see that this one, new service, probably doesn't make any sense, right? If I do a get service and I pipe that to new service, yeah, that doesn't really make any sense because a new service is creating something new. We're not piping something into it. So that probably doesn't make sense. But could I do a get service, find a service, and pipe it to restart service or resume or set service and do some configuration or start a service or stop a service? Yeah, that actually probably makes sense. Let me show you how this works. I'm going to do a get service and I'm going to look at the bits service. And we'll see the bits service is currently stopped. So I want to hit my up arrow. I want to pipe that to start service. Now, if you're familiar with PowerShell, you'll probably asking, why don't you just do start service bits? You can actually. We're just trying to illustrate the way this pipeline works. So I'm going to do a get service bits and I'm going to pipe it to start service. And then if I do a get service, dang it, let me do get service bits and just look at one of them. We'll see this actually running. Now I can do the same thing. I can get service bits, pipe it to stop service, and that should stop my service. So I'll do get service bits again, and sure enough it did. Now, what if I wanted to be able to run this command, get service, and then stop or start it, and then display the output? So if I do that, get service bits, pipe that to start service, pipe that to get service, this actually doesn't work for me. And the reason it doesn't is because start service and stop service as well, you saw we had no output here, it doesn't generate any output. So what happens here is we get this service, we pipe it to this commandlet, which executes it, but then it doesn't generate any objects, or it doesn't keep any objects moving down the pipeline to go to the next commandlet. That's why we get no output here, why we get no output here. Now, if I want to, I can do something a little bit different, and not every command is going to include this, but service does. I can do a dash pass through. And basically what that does is I'll take this service, I'll stop it, but then I'll go ahead and pass that object on down to get service, which will then be able to pull that service and tell me if it worked or not. Whoops. Hit the wrong key. Stop service dash pass through, and now we can test it and we can see, yes, it worked. We got the service, we stopped it, we passed it through, and then we were able to display the end result. Now, this is an example of using the pipeline. I get something, I pass it down the pipeline that processes it, that passes it down the pipeline to do something else with it. I could run, if I didn't want to do the restart service, I could do get service bits, stop service, pipe it to start service. I have to do the pass through, but I could do that instead of the restart service. So we're just passing things along. Now, general rule of thumb, I already said one of them, if they have the same noun, you can normally Not always, but normally pass objects. You'll normally get first and then you'll do something else with it. So get and then something that processes it. You can pass things to object commandlets. So we have a bunch of commandlets, get command noun object, and these are generic object commandlets. So we can compare, we can do for each, we can group, we can measure, we can select, we can sort, we can where object. So all of these are different things we can do with generic objects. So I can get anything and pass it to an object commandlet. Similar thing with format commandlets. So get command, these are going to be verb format, and we're going to talk about these in another video in a little bit. I can pass them to a format list, a format table, a format wide. Don't pass them to format volume unless you're trying to, format a volume. But these are some generic commandlets that I can pass things through. All right, those are the rules of thumb. Let's take a look at the details. So I'm going to do a get help on stop service. Now this will tell me I've got my different parameter sets and it tells me what they expect. So stop service will take an input object and it can use a system.serviceProcess.serverController object. Well, that's what happens when I do the get service bits and I pass it to stop service. It's a service controller object, so it passes it to this parameter set because it sees an input object coming in. You can also see down here, here's another example. This isn't as clear, but you'll see under name, it's going to expect a system.string value. Now this doesn't tell us that we can use a pipeline input for this, but if I do, get help, not get service, get help on get service, and if I look at my full help information, if I can type correctly, pipe that to more. Okay, for each one of my parameters, you're going to see this. Here's my parameters, and this is the information about each parameter. So this is my computer name parameter, and what I'm looking for is this line right here, accept pipeline input. Now this is the one we're playing with, this is computer name. But you'll see that yes, this does accept pipeline input, and it does it by property name. Let's go down a little farther. Here's an input object right here. And it does accept pipeline input by value. But some of these, like the exclude, pipeline input is false. You can't pipe input into that. So this will tell you in detail whether you're allowed to use pipeline input or not. Okay, let's clear this. That example of using pipeline input, get service, pipe it to stop service, pass through, pipe it to get service, it illustrates the idea of passing things along a pipeline. It's not actually a practical application because you're probably not going to do that. You're probably just going to do a start service or stop service. You're not going to get it and then pipe it first. Let me try to give you another example that might be helpful. So I've created a little file here. Do a get child item, and I've created a little file here called services.csv. So I'm going to open up Notepad and I'm going to look at services.csv, and you'll see this is a CSV file. I have a bunch of objects. They each are going to have one property. It's going to be name. So I have DHCP, DNS cache, logon, and spooler, and these are all services. And let's say I wanted to be able to monitor these services on a regular basis. And I don't want to do get service and have to look through the list to find all four of them. And I don't want to do get service DHCP, enter, get service DNS cache, enter, get service net logon, enter, I don't want to do them all individually. I want to do them as a group. So what I do is I create a CSV file. Now I can import CSV services.csv, provided of course that I spell import correctly. And here we'll see our objects. Okay, pretty straightforward, right? So I'm going to import it and I'm going to pipe that to get service. And what it should do is it should take these 4 objects and pipe them to the get service, and it should return the status of those 4 objects for me. Great, that's perfect. Now that's going to show me in one command the status of 4 of my services. And if I wanted to find more, all I have to do is add it. So I'm going to notepad my services.csv file, and I'm going to add, I want to monitor the bits service. And so now when I issue the exact same command, it's going to show the bit service for me as well. Okay, so I'm pipelining input here, and notice, by the way, that these do not match nouns in my commandlets, but it works because I have objects that I can pass, and the get service, it's recognizing the name of these. So do my import CSV, you'll see we have a name parameter or name property, and so it's recognizing that name and it's putting that name into the name field, and it works great. Okay, it doesn't always. So let me show you something here. Let me do my notepad services.csv, and these had a column header of name. What happens if I change that to service? By the way, it's not the capital that makes it the column header or the property name. It's just the fact that it's on the top line. So I'm going to save my file, and now I'm going to do this again. Import services CSV, pipe it to get service. But this time when I do it, it says I can't find any service with the name at service equals DHCP, at service equals DNS, at service equals. Well, that's because I changed this, that really makes that hard to read, from name to service. Okay, how do I fix that? Well, I can do one of two things. I can change it back to name, or I'm going to show you another thing here. I can do a get, I'm going to do an import CSV, services.csv, and if I just hit that, you'll see service, and then there's my properties. This is my property, these are my values. So I can pass information to the get service commandlet by value or by property. So I'm going to pass it, if I can't pass it by property because this is wrong, this is service, not name, what I can do is I can expand property service. I can't do it that way. Pipe it to select object, expand property service. And what that does, you'll see the difference here. This one has this service header, this one does not. So this extracts a text out of this these objects, and so now I'm passing text to get service, and now it works just fine. Now that becomes really, really useful because we've just seen how we could do the import services.csv and get service. There's another way I can do this as well. I can flip the order. So I can do a get service and then in parentheses import CSV services.csv. That's not going to work because same thing we saw before, we can't find services by that name. But I can use my pipe to select object, expand property, service, I think it was service. There we go, it was service. And now it does the same thing. It takes this, imports the objects, this looks for a specific property, service, and then expands it to be text, and then backfills that into here. Now, this command that we just ran and this command, yeah, that one, is functionally the same commands. Right here in this bottom example, I'm importing, I'm expanding, that gives me text objects, I pipe it to get service, it works fine. Here, I'm doing the same thing, except I started out with get service, but what I'm doing is it's rules of algebra. If this is in parentheses, that means you do this first and then you feed it back here. And so I feed it back here, and this goes into the name parameter. Oops. Let me get rid of that line. Get help on get service, pipe it some more. It's going to that name parameter, which is looking for a string value. That's what I gave it when I did the expand property. And it's putting it here in the positional parameter of name. And notice that's a positional parameter, so I don't have to type it. So get service sees a bunch of text objects and says, oh, I know what those are. Those are names of services I need to go retrieve. Okay, that's how it works. All right. That hopefully gives you some ideas of how we can pass objects down a pipeline. Now, this little trick that I just did, these are going to go into the name parameter. It would basically be the same thing as if I did dash name import services. Okay, that says, put these in the name parameter. Now, that becomes really useful because I might have more than one CSV file that I want to import, right? I might want to monitor these services on a set of computers, not just this one. So get service includes a computer name parameter. So I could include a list of computers that I wanted to monitor it on. I could build it as a CSV file like I did with services, and then I could do dash computer name and then import the CSV file there as well. So this little trick of being able to store data in CSV files and basically, whoa, that didn't do what I wanted it to do. Store data as a CSV file and then be able to use them kind of like permanent variables becomes a very, very useful trick.